Kaisha Halberg Edu, Njekwa Mate, Olugbemiga Folabi, and Shadrach Wanjala Nasongo. I had prepared elaborate introductory and concluding speeches, but I was warned that my job is just that of a timekeeper, so I'll keep it that simple and ask us to go just according to the order in which the speakers have been listed. I'll give each speaker 14 minutes. All of them will present, and then we'll have questions and discussions at the end. So, Mr. Folabi, you have the floor. 14 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. My presentation is on comparative political science knowledge and the quality of political institutions in Africa of the Department of Politics, University of Johannesburg in South Africa, as well as Obafemi Awolowo University, Nigeria. The introduction goes that African universities have a high number of departments.
My name is Njekwa Mate from the University of Zambia, Department of Political and Administrative Studies. I'm also the regional manager for the Varieties of Democracy project for Southern Africa. So my presentation is on the impact of political science research on teaching political science in Africa. Maybe I was too ambitious, because after trying to gather information, I only ended up with more information on Southern Africa than other regions. So perhaps the final paper will focus on Southern Africa. So the structure is as follows. There's an introduction, methodology, then I'll look at political science and democracy databases. There are quite a number of them. Then we'll look at the use of databases in teaching at various universities in Southern Africa, and the use of databases by students. Then we'll move on to focus on the contributions and impact of these databases. Then we'll look at the availability of infrastructure and capacities at the various universities where I got information from. Then I'll conclude and provide recommendations. So many academic and research institutes, next slide, have produced empirical data on political science research, on democracy, on governance over the 100 years in almost all the countries in the world. But at the core of all this research is that we should generate knowledge and disseminate it. Knowledge regarding the political science discipline, knowledge regarding democracy, the democratization process in Africa, and also knowledge regarding governance in the world and in Africa. In most African countries, the development of the universities and research has been firmly tied to the vagaries of state politics and policies, and the shifting missions and mandates of international donor agencies, and the unpredictable demands and dislocations of civil society, the civil society sector. However, in Africa, we also have challenges, and these include the cultures of universities themselves. They've been changing over time. And in my own university, in fact, or Zambia in particular, we have even seen a change in the way government is now viewing how they should run public universities. So increasingly politicians are saying universities should fund themselves. So the logic is changing. So, and you have seen also policymakers adopting this view, and it has filtered through to technocrats. So we are facing challenges of funding, and with challenges of funding, it's difficult to teach, it's difficult to do research, and many other activities that universities should do. So there are also challenges regarding the goals and governance of research institutions and universities. There are also challenges regarding the management of resources, infrastructures, and their capacities to pursue intellectual excellence and equity. There is also the issue of political autonomy and public accountability. In Africa, we have seen also that public universities nowadays don't seem to be autonomous from the government or from politics. Increasingly, government is interfering in the operations of universities. I can speak for my own universities. We have seen academics being controlled not only in terms of how the institution should be funded, but also in terms of what programs will be sponsored for the students who are coming in, and also in terms of what kind of research the government funds and so on and so forth. And we've also seen that government increasingly, for public universities, they are moving away from funding public universities. And there's absolutely, like in my country, there's absolutely no funding for research from the government. You have to source your own funds for research. So the methodology, I did a literature review, document review, administered some questionnaires to colleagues at my university and another public university just north of Lusaka, because in Zambia we only have 2 universities that teach political science. Also emailed some questions to some colleagues in Malawi. I had some responses in Malawi, responses from Mozambique. There were no responses from Botswana, no responses from Zimbabwe, no responses from Namibia. Of course, South Africa is at a different level. They always respond to requests for information. There were no responses from Tanzania and so on. So you can see that the response rate was quite low. I also did some key informants interviews with some colleagues in Zambia and Malawi. So there are various political science databases. We know of Polity4, which gathers information from 195 countries from 1800 to date or present. Then there's Adam Proziski and others. Freedom House, which gathers information from 195 countries, but from 1973 to date or present. The Van Index of Democratization, Jose Shibab type of regime, gathering information from 1945 to 2000. I don't know whether I'm correct on that. The Economist, sorry, there's a mistake. The Economist Intelligence Unit, Democracy Index, which gathers information from 167 countries since 2006. Then there's the Ibrahim Index of African Governance, which gathers information from 54 countries from 2007 to date. But you should note that for this index, they usually update information. So for 2018, they're updating the information. If they update the information, then they delete like the previous round. So you have always to rely on the latest. Yeah, then there's Afrobarometer, which gathers information from 37 countries in Africa. And since 1999, Afrobarometer has conducted 6 surveys. Varieties of Democracy gathers information from 1900 to date or present, focusing on 202 countries. And from 2015, when VDEM started releasing databases, they have reached version 9. Version 10, the version 10 dataset for VDEM will be out probably first quarter of 2020. Then there's Global Integrity, focusing on 54 countries since 2013. Quality of Government, focusing on data from 1946 to date or present. And in fact, the American Political Science Association has regarded quality of government, the Quality of Government Index, as one of the best. I think they won an award at an APSA conference sometime back. Then there's World Bank governance indicators focusing on 200 countries from 1996, and so on and so forth. So those are just some of the databases. There are obviously some more databases. Then I'll move on, next slide. The use of databases in teaching. Just from the presentation by Dr. Afolabi, the usage obviously is low, with an exception of South Africa. The usage in most of it at the University of Zambia is low, at the University of Malawi is low, and also in Mozambique, and so on and so forth. So these databases aid the delivery of courses, such as research methods, according to the responses I got from the people I talked to. They say the databases help them in delivery of courses such as research methods, comparative politics, democracy, democratization, and governance. And in terms of helps lecturers and students to move away from relying on books and articles alone, they begin to interact with datasets to have a practical and evidence-based analysis of political developments in Africa and beyond. However, most of the course modules at Southern African universities, with the exception of South Africa, are not fully using this data because the faculty members haven't interacted so much with these databases. It's far much easier, for example, to just, if you're teaching, for example, comparative politics, to just look at the different party systems in different countries than looking at a detailed analysis of what the data sets are telling you, and so on and so forth. So you can see that the academia uses more qualitative methods, or at my university, they call it use of qualitative methods, but at the end of the day, it's just too much focus on document reviews. So at most universities, sources of cutting-edge research information are somewhat limited. So the databases can make it possible to get supplementary teaching information from all such databases. VDEM provides an example of latest research information that is regularly shared world over. The datasets can be downloaded. Afrobarometer also data is available and it can be downloaded. And in fact, for Africa, Afrobarometer is the most used database. Even for Zambian scholars, Afrobarometer is the most used databases. Even for the Malawian scholars, they told me that they use Afrobarometer data more than anything else. This is perhaps simply because Afrobarometer has been training scholars from African universities. Still do that now. I know also Kodesia does that. The Mo Ibrahim Foundation also provides regular updates. Use of databases by students. Students in research methods often use this data and comparative politics, but the usage is more by master's and PhD students than undergraduate students. There are not as many students using this because of insufficient grounding on how to do data analysis, especially analysis of a quantitative nature. So they need to use these databases, cause for students to use the internet, and this is a challenge in some African universities, as opposed to the reliance on textbooks. So traditional sources of information, such as textbooks, are still being used side by side with databases, but perhaps more. So it helps students have a more current empirical data that they can analyze themselves. And these databases enriches the theoretical basis in class lessons, and discussions. Has teaching changed? it hasn't changed much. Although we have noted that teaching would be more theoretical in the absence of such databases. And these databases enable students to have hands-on experience in research courses, and so on and so forth. They also enlighten students on the political developments in the continent and beyond, if they want to understand or grasp what is happening regarding democracy, governance, and so on and so forth. They need to refer to these democracy and governance indices so that they can compare various countries in terms of how they are faring on the democracy index or governance index. So teaching has not significantly changed because the use of this data is still limited, as Afolabi has, Dr. Afolabi has said. Okay, 1 minute. So the availability of these databases has opened up possibilities of cross-country analysis. And sometimes politicians react to research findings, positively or negatively. And policymakers cite such findings, which can be used as a proxy to measure the impact of these data sets or databases. In addition, these databases, the databases that are generated through public surveys, indirectly shape the decisions of political leaders as well as how they worry about the votes they'll get in the next election. The other proxy that can be used to measure the impact of these data sets or databases is to look at the downloads, dissertations, theses, publications, and policy briefs that have been produced by African scholars. I don't have much information on this, but perhaps the final version, I'll be able to analyze the number of downloads. What these databases do, and do very well, is that they tell the story of the phenomenon as they evolve. So in that way, those who use the databases are kept abreast of these developments. So I can skip that slide. Let me skip some slide. So the availability of, we look at the availability of infrastructure and capacities. So both infrastructure and capacities remain a challenge. There could be many reasons. Lecturers interested in the use of this data are few, as Dr. Afolabi has said. And also there is lack of use of statistical software. The next slide. Such as SPSS, Stata, NVivo, Atlas TI, and so on and so forth. So universities in Southern Africa, with an exception of South Africa, are facing challenges regarding infrastructure. However, the ARA software is free. So it can easily be downloaded and students can interact with it and so on and so forth. Conclusion, the use of databases in some universities is low. Afrobarometer is the most widely used, although there's also an increase in the terms of the use of other databases like VDEM, the Ibrahim Indicator of African Governance, Polity, and so on and so forth. Then a few recommendations. This is the last slide. Yeah, sorry. There is great need to build capacity in the use by universities of databases for academic work. Then regional, national, and continental political science associations need to take up this challenge. Political science disciplines in Africa need to collaborate more because currently there is very little collaboration. And lastly, research institutions need to run summer or winter schools, perhaps focusing on the model by Afrobarometer or Codesha. Thank you.